Okay, start the recording. So here we have our exercise solved. Vael asked what if we want the name to be above, like the label to be above the input fields. Do any of you have any ideas how we would do that? So why is it that they are on the same line in the first place right now?
Because it's inline.
Yeah.
So we can make it like a display block.
Yeah. Could we try it here? Yeah. In general, I would prefer you to not use display inline block because it causes some unexpected issues. Display flags for what?
For the current.
But we want them to be under each other, right?
Under each other.
Yeah. So what do? I want the name to be above the input field.
Inside the div, I make the div display fix.
Why?
So I can apply justify contain column.
But okay, if you make the div display flex,
yeah,
and then do what?
Order.
And then flex item or item number one. Flex display.
Well, flex is normally used to. Do you mean flex direction column?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would actually work, but I would say it's a bit of an overkill, because the only thing, if you just select the label and say display block, that solves it, right? Because then your label will, instead of be an inline, it will be a block level element, and that will push everything else from the next next to it to the next line or the next row. So I think that would be the easiest to do in here. And you can also say that if you select your div, you could say that after each div there should be a margin bottom of like 20 pixels, and then you have separated your inputs that way. But for the homework, the assignment says that you shouldn't focus so much on the CSS. You should just focus on the HTML for this one, because it's so complex that you can do some custom styling, but do it at the very end. Okay, good job, all of you. I'm going to also save this one and post it on. Yeah, I'm gonna, so we have this one. I'm gonna post it on Slack. Class 1 forms example 1. Forms example 2. Okay, so the last thing we have time to cover is the rest of the types that there are. So there is, besides an input field, if you want to write some more text, what would you use for that? You wouldn't use an input. You would use, for example, if you say, I don't know, description, a description field. You expect a lot of text content. What element would you use?
Text.
Text area. Yeah. Text area. We don't need the name for this one. We can call it description. You see, it will create this bigger box for you. So that's pretty nice. Here you can write a lot of text, and you can, all of this calls and rows, that defines how big it should be. This is 30 columns and 10 rows. The columns is not necessary for you to define. I think, well, I guess you can. but you would probably use a width instead of the calls to define how wide it should be. The rows will define its height, and that is fine too. Will get smaller. So this is like how many lines of text you expect to have.
But normally they define how many words you should write or how many letters.
Yeah, you can also do that.
And
You can have a, I think it's called a min max something. That's for validation, but that could be like a placeholder, right? So you could say placeholder, and then you could say maximum 400 characters. Is that what you mean?
It's required
Yeah.
that you should enter, for example, 300 letters to write something.
At
Like
least.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is the min input. So there's this one called min length, and this is also something that the HTML the browser will validate for. So you will get an error when you try to submit it if you set a min length of 200, for example, and you have fewer characters, then it will not let you submit. So that's something you can use for. So, okay, let's try it. So we say we want a min length of 200, right?
Yeah.
And then we take this submit button from the other form. And then for oh yeah, this is a very important point. So if I submit it now,
Yeah, you missed the wire.
then it will actually submit it. Did you see? It actually did submit it.
Yeah, because you don't write it wire.
Exactly. So the browser will only validate any of the things that you write if you make it required. It has to be required for it to get any validation. And now it will say that you need to fill it in. And then if I write 3 characters and I have had an error before, then it will say that if I try to submit it again, it will say it has to be at least 200 characters. And then it say how many you have currently. So that's really, really nice. Also something you get for free from HTML. Okay, so the last we are gonna be covering today are checkboxes and radio buttons. I'm just trying to look if there are any. In the preparation document for this week, there is a link to all the different. That's the one I was at. Okay. Okay, then I'll get back to Bootstrap. So this is another element. It's one called type checkbox. So if I add the new one here, so if we say a new div, and then we write it, we can just write it the same way, a label, and then input, and then the input type will be checkbox, and the label will be, do you want the newsletter? And I'm not sure, maybe I need to have the input before. I also need the ID, possibly. just gonna call it newsletter. Newsletter. Okay, so it's not displaying it. Ah, of course, that's because I set all my labels to display block. So I can say yeah, I'm just gonna say this one class inline because I want the other ones to be. I'm just gonna call this label inline, and this is gonna be display inline. I can also edit so it's display inline flex. Don't know if that's better. Sort of the same, I guess. Okay, so now I have created. Can you see now I have created this checkbox, and this is where the for and the ID gets super important. So you see that on my input I have an ID newsletter, and on my label I have a for newsletter. And then over here, that's a very, very little tiny box I can like if I try to target that with my mouse, right? So I think 99% of the time your users will click on the text instead. So if you don't connect your label to your input field, so if I delete that, right? If I delete that and then I try to click on the text, it's not going to select it. And your users will suddenly hate you so much. It's really, really annoying if you have to click on that instead of the whole text, right? So try to yeah, this. Yeah, try to remember it. Is it there now? Yeah. Okay. Cool. So that's checkboxes. If you have multiple checkboxes, then you can just list them under each other. So you can just do another checkbox like that. Oh, of course, they need to have a different ID. Otherwise, they will get messed up. They will select each other and all that. So that works fine. So what if you have radio buttons? Let's try to see how. You know what radio buttons are? So radio buttons are if you only can select one. Yeah. Okay. So the difference between radio buttons and checkboxes are, HTML-wise, is that when you create them, so let's say we create one with type radio. The type is called radio. We're just gonna say radio example. That's gonna be the ID. And we say actually, the way I normally wrap my radio buttons is I normally wrap them in a field set. A field set is if you have multiple input groups that are sort of connected to each other. So, for example, it's for grouping multiple input fields, right? So if you have an input field that is about what is your favorite pizza topping? Super important question. Then your legend would be the title of that group. And then the input groups would be, actually you can still wrap them in a div. Then you would have the different options. Then we can say tomato, onion, what else? I'm not good. Olives. Okay. So now you see there are 3 options here, right? If I want, I don't want this to happen. I want to be able to select one of them, right? It shouldn't be possible to select all of them. So I think what I did wrong here is, let's see. Maybe I'm actually, oh yeah, right. So how is it now? So I think here you need to specify on the radio buttons, yeah. So on the radio buttons you need to specify the value. So this could be olives and onion and tomato. So that you need to specify the value on the input field when you are using radio buttons. So that would be tomato. The reason for that is that when you are sending a form, you need to say, like, the inputs are multiple options for the same questions, right? What is your favorite pizza topping? You can only choose one of them, and the selected one. So if I say onion, for example, then that value needs to be sent with your form. So that's why you need a value for those. And you are not typing anything, so it will not get a value otherwise, like text inputs would, right? If I write something here, that will be the value. Here, the value has to be something that I specify myself. So let's see what. So we need, I think, okay, right. So here with radio buttons, we do need the name. So I'm just gonna try to make this a little more easy to read. Okay, so we have a label and an input in each div, right? And we have the same ID. Apparently that should not be the same, but we should have a name that is the same. So we'll specify a name. I'm just gonna call it pizza, because it should be something that is related to all of your options.
You seem to be hungry.
I'm always hungry. I come from Hungary.
Yeah.
So now it's working.
Yeah.
So the reason why it wasn't working before was that I specified the same ID for each option, but I shouldn't. The ID and the 4 in the label should still be unique.
Yes.
The values should still be unique, but the name should be the same for all 3. Yeah? So that's what connects them. Okay? Is this clear? Okay. What did you say? Yes, I'm gonna post it. So I'm not sure how well you are set for the homework, but I guess we'll find out. You're, as always, welcome to ask questions on Slack. Okay, and next week we are going to, it's 99% sure that we are moving over to the other place. So this was the temporary location, and now we're going to do the permanent location, which is much more like social. There's gonna be a developer community that hangs out there. So what we would like to create. I'm just gonna close the recording.